We all remember the adrenaline rush, the high-speed chases, the last-second escapes, the moments when it felt like the actors were living the danger, not just performing it. That's the magic of a great action film. It makes us forget it's all staged. But sometimes, it isn't. Sometimes, the danger is real. The fear in the actor's eyes isn't acting. The explosion wasn't fully controlled. The blood wasn't fake. In a desperate push for authenticity, some directors and stars cross a line, turning a movie set into a battlefield and fiction into a near-deadly reality. Hollywood is known for polish, control, and illusion. So when a production steps outside those boundaries, when it risks lives for realism, the industry doesn't celebrate it. It hides it, buries the footage, settles lawsuits in silence, and hopes you never ask questions. Because behind the clean stunts and CGI safety nets, there's another history of action cinema, one written in broken bones, real bullets, and unsanctioned madness. It's the story of films that didn't just blur the line between performance and reality, they shattered it. What if the most gripping moment in your favorite movie was never supposed to happen? What if the actor wasn't following the script, but fighting to survive? These aren't just wild rumors, these are real productions, with real consequences and stories so intense, most studios hope you've forgotten them entirely. Let's pull back the curtain and dive into 15 action movies where reality went too far, and the cost was almost everything. Fact has sown. The Dark Knight, 2008. The truck flip that could have killed everyone. Imagine flipping a full-size semi-truck in the middle of a downtown street with no CGI, no green screen, and no backup plan. That's exactly what director Christopher Nolan insisted on during the filming of The Dark Knight. In a scene that would become one of the most iconic moments in modern action cinema, a massive truck flips vertically onto its nose and crashes back down on the asphalt right in the middle of Chicago's LaSalle Street. Nolan refused to fake it. Instead, he brought in special effects supervisor Chris Corbould, who designed a hydraulic-driven ram beneath the truck's trailer. No visual effects, no digital tricks, just raw physics and precision. The stunt was so dangerous that only one attempt could be made. If it failed, the entire sequence and millions of dollars would be ruined. Worse, if a single calculation was off, the driver could be crushed. Every crew member on set knew. This wasn't just another shot, it was a real gamble. When the stunt executed perfectly, applause broke out. But Warner Brothers executives, watching remotely, were anything but thrilled. They had no idea the stunt was done for real and were horrified when they found out. Ironically, this one-take miracle became the centerpiece of the film's trailer. But behind the thrill was a terrifying truth. It only worked because no one blinked in the face of real danger. But Nolan wasn't the only one pushing boundaries for realism. Fact #2, Mad Max, Fury Road, 2015. Real stunts, real speed, real danger. No green screens, no superhero wires. Just screaming engines, burning rubber, and bodies flung through the air. That was George Miller's demand when bringing Mad Max, Fury Road to life. Shot in the desolate landscapes of Namibia, the film featured over 150 real vehicles, most of which were custom-built and operated by actual stunt professionals, not just to look cool, but to crash, flip, and explode in real time. Actors Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron didn't just ride along for show, they were often inches from death. In one scene, stuntwoman Dana Grant had to perform a high-speed leap between two moving vehicles while wearing a metal mask and corset. If she had misjudged her timing by half a second, she'd have landed under the wheels. George Miller insisted on practical effects to convey chaos that no computer could replicate. But the cost was high. Dozens of stunt performers suffered injuries, ranging from concussions to broken ribs. And because the film was shot far from major hospitals, several emergencies required air evacuation. Despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, the visceral realism paid off. The film swept awards for editing and effects, praised for its unfiltered intensity. Still, when watching Fury Road, it's worth remembering, no pixels were harmed, but real people almost were. And sometimes, the price wasn't almost, it was final. Fact #3, The Crow, 1994, a real bullet that killed Brandon Lee. It was supposed to be his breakout role. Instead, it became his last. Brandon Lee, son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, was filming a scene for The Crow in 1993 when a prop gun meant to fire blanks accidentally discharged a real fragment, striking him in the abdomen. What no one realized was that the gun had been improperly cleaned after a prior shot. A dummy bullet had lodged inside the barrel. When the blank was fired, it propelled the fragment with the force of a live round. Within hours, Lee was dead. The production had been under pressure to cut corners. The firearms specialist had been dismissed days earlier to save money, leaving the responsibility in untrained hands. Safety protocols were ignored, and all for a scene that wasn't even crucial to the story. The tragedy was met with horror but not surprise. Hollywood insiders had long warned that lax safety standards could lead to disaster. Still, the studio finished the film, using early CGI and body doubles to complete Brandon's remaining scene. The final product became a cult classic, its shadowy aesthetic deepened by real-life loss. But every frame carried the weight of a death that never should have happened. Brandon Lee died acting out a fantasy. But the gun, the wound, and the silence that followed were all painfully real. And yet, The Crow wasn't the only production where realism came at a deadly cost. Fact #4. Apocalypto, 2006. Jungle terror that was all too real. Shooting in a rainforest sounds romantic until you're actually there, bleeding, dehydrated, and surrounded by venomous creatures. Mel Gibson's Apocalypto was a film of extremes. Set in the collapsing Mayan civilization, it was shot deep in the jungles of Mexico, where conditions pushed the cast and crew to physical and psychological limits. Bugs nested in equipment, humidity ruined makeup within minutes, and the terrain, unforgiving. Lead actor Rudy Youngblood performed most of his own stunts, including a death-defying jump from a waterfall nearly 100 feet high. There were no digital composites. He really jumped and nearly drowned. After surfacing, he was swept into a current and struck his head on submerged rocks, causing a concussion. The danger didn't end there. One crew member was bitten by a venomous snake. Another fell ill after drinking untreated water. Reports emerged of extras collapsing from heat stroke. Gibson insisted the realism would translate into tension the audience could feel. He wasn't wrong, but the cost was near catastrophic. Critics praised the film's raw intensity, but some questioned whether the suffering was worth the cinematic payoff. One reviewer called it an endurance test for actors disguised as a historical epic. Still, Apocalypto remains a reminder. When you trade safety for spectacle, the jungle always takes its toll. And for some stars, it wasn't nature that endangered them, it was their own devotion. Fact #5. Rambo, First Blood, 1982. Stallone jumped off a cliff himself. Sylvester Stallone didn't just play John Rambo, he became him. In one of the most visceral moments of First Blood, Rambo jumps off a cliff to escape pursuing officers and crashes through a tree before hitting the ground. Most stars would leave that to a stunt double. Stallone didn't. He insisted on performing the leap himself. The result? A snapped rib audibly cracked on camera and a bruised spine. The scream you hear in the film isn't scripted, it's real pain. The scene was only supposed to be rehearsed. But Stallone, feeling the adrenaline, told the crew to roll the cameras. With only a few pads hidden in the brush and no safety harness, he launched himself into the air and trusted gravity to carry the shot. It nearly carried him to the hospital. After reviewing the footage, the director offered to cut the scene. Stallone refused. He believed audiences would feel the authenticity, and they did. The moment became one of the defining shots of the entire franchise. But even he later admitted the decision was reckless. "I was lucky," he said in an interview years later. "It could have ended everything." For other productions, the danger didn't come from a leap, it came from the world crumbling around them. Fact #6. The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, 2018. A production cursed by nature. It took 29 years to make, and nearly broke everyone who tried. Terry Gilliam's The Man Who Killed Don Quixote is infamous not for its plot, but for its cursed production. While this may not be a traditional action film, its behind-the-scenes chaos rivals any war epic. In 2000, Gilliam began shooting in Spain. Within days, a flash flood wiped out the entire set. Equipment was destroyed. The terrain changed so drastically that continuity was impossible. On top of that, fighter jets from a nearby military base began interrupting takes, despite reassurances they wouldn't fly overhead. Lead actor Jean Rochefort suffered a herniated disc from riding horses during filming and had to quit. Insurance disputes forced the production to shut down entirely. What followed were years of failed restarts, lawsuits, and recasting. When the film was finally completed in 2018, most of the original crew had moved on or burned out. The end product was polarizing, but the journey behind it was something out of a fever dream. Mudslides, bankruptcies, lost footage, and mental breakdown. Gilliam later joked, "It's not filmmaking, it's warfare. In this case, the realism didn't come from the actors. It came from the merciless environment they dared to film in. And speaking of dangerous dedication, one superstar took realism to a whole new level with a broken bone and a scene that never stopped rolling. Fact-7. Mission Impossible Fallout 2018. Cruise's broken ankle scene stayed in the film. Most actors run from danger. Tom Cruise runs into it and keeps the cameras rolling. During a high-stakes rooftop chase in Mission Impossible Fallout, Cruise was meant to leap from one building to another, catching the edge with his hands. He misjudged the jump by inches and slammed into the wall. His ankle snapped on impact. The moment wasn't faked. The footage shows Cruise limping up and out of frame, refusing to break character. What audiences didn't know, that limp was real. So was the bone break. And the scene you see in the final film, that's the take where it happened. Production halted for nearly 2 months while Cruise recovered. The studio urged him to use body doubles for future stunts. He refused. In fact, he doubled down, filming an even more dangerous helicopter stunt just weeks later. Cruise is no stranger to injury. He's hung off airplanes, scaled the Burj Khalifa, and held his breath underwater for over 6 minutes on camera. But Fallout marked a turning point. A moment when commitment crossed into obsession. The gamble paid off. Critics hailed Fallout as the best installment in the franchise, praising its grounded intensity. But behind every jaw-dropping stunt was a man willing to shatter bones for a few seconds of unfiltered realism. And sometimes, that realism didn't just result in injury, it left behind something darker. Fact-Hashite, Ben-Hur, 1959. The chariot scene that got bloody. It's one of the most iconic action sequences in film history. The chariot race in Ben-Hur, 8 minutes of dust, speed, and death-defying turns. What most people don't know is that it wasn't just movie magic. The entire scene was filmed practically, with real horses, real wooden chariots, and real riders, often inches from catastrophe, shot over 5 weeks at Cinecittà Studios in Rome. The scene used over 18 cameras and hundreds of extras. The horses were trained meticulously, but there were no digital safety nets, no second chances. At full gallop, a single misstep could mean tragedy. Rumors have long circulated that a stuntman died during filming. MGM has denied it, but internal memos and crew testimonies suggest otherwise. At least one rider was reportedly thrown from his chariot and trampled. That footage, allegedly destroyed. The version in the film shows near misses so convincing, many assumed they were edited. They weren't. Charlton Heston, who played Judah Ben-Hur, trained for months to control his team of 4 horses. In one scene, he's nearly thrown from the chariot and catches himself on the rail by sheer luck. The realism stunned 1,959 audiences. But today, it's seen in a harsher light, as an example of the studio system's willingness to risk lives for spectacle. And Ben-Hur wasn't the last film to pay a human price for its ambition. Fact-9. Roar. 1,981. 70 injuries, 1 film. Imagine filming a movie surrounded by 150 untrained lions, tigers, leopards, and elephants with no protection. That was Roar, the brainchild of Noel Marshall and Tippi Hedren, who believed that shooting a film with live big cats would raise awareness about wildlife conservation. Instead, they created one of the most dangerous productions in cinematic history. The crew suffered over 70 documented injuries. Tippi Hedren was clawed across the face. Her daughter, Melanie Griffith, required plastic surgery after being mauled. Cinematographer Jan de Bont was scalped by a lion and needed 120 stitches. Even Noel Marshall, the film's director and star, was bitten so many times he contracted gangrene. There were no trained animal handlers. The lions weren't actors, they were predators, reacting on instinct. Scenes often spiraled out of control, with animals attacking cameras, furniture, and crew. And still, the cameras kept rolling. It took 11 years to complete Roar. Insurance companies refused to cover it. Studios wouldn't distribute it. When it finally premiered, it flopped, but left behind a legacy of horror stories that still circulate in Hollywood today. The most chilling part? Most of the animal attacks made it into the final cut. Roar wasn't a movie about danger, it was the danger. And the next story takes us to an icy set where freezing water blurred the line between fiction and frostbite. Fact-0. Titanic, 1997. The freezing scene that froze the crew too. Everyone remembers the icy waters, the breath that turned to mist, the bodies shivering as the ship slipped under. What they don't know is it wasn't acting. James Cameron, obsessed with realism, refused to film the sinking of the Titanic in warm water. Instead, he kept the massive water tank cooled to near freezing temperatures. Actors spent hours submerged, lips turning blue, muscles locking from cold. Kate Winslet nearly drowned. Trapped under a piece of set debris, she tore free, only to realize the safety crew hadn't seen her slip. "I thought I was going to die," she later confessed. Extras collapsed from hypothermia, several developed pneumonia, and when a crew member spiked the clam chowder with PCP as a prank, the chaos was complete. Dozens were hospitalized. Cameron wouldn't back down. He insisted the cold was necessary to capture the truth of the moment. Even Leonardo DiCaprio reportedly begged for warmer conditions. The director's reply? The ocean wasn't warm in 1912. The gamble worked. The film swept awards, redefined cinematic spectacle, and became a cultural touchstone. But behind the elegance was an undercurrent of frostbite, fear, and near-fatal misjudgment. And as grueling as water was, some filmmakers chased realism through speed, filming chaos from the eyes of a human weapon. Fact Hassanon, Hardcore Henry, 2015. The first-person chaos shot live. What if you filmed a movie entirely from the eyes of the killer? No cuts, no safety, just pure velocity. That was the concept behind Hardcore Henry, the first major action film shot entirely in first-person perspective. It wasn't just a gimmick, it was a dare. Director Ilya Naishuller wanted every action sequence, every punch, explosion, car chase, and fall captured in real time with a GoPro strapped to the actor's face. There were no dolly tracks, no second unit, just raw motion. The performer behind Henry wasn't a traditional actor, he was a stuntman, constantly sprinting, crashing through windows, tumbling down stairwells, and leaping across rooftops. In one scene, the crew rigged a harness for a vertical drop, but the GoPro slipped sideways mid-shot, nearly slamming the actor's head into a steel beam. Many of the action scenes were filmed in crowded, uncontrolled environments. Cars swerved within inches, fireworks exploded in confined rooms, and the camera never blinked. The result is dizzying both literally and figuratively. Viewers praised the film's intensity, but critics warned it blurred the line between innovation and irresponsibility. The actors weren't protected by wide shots or editing. If something went wrong, there was no reset. Hardcore Henry delivered a level of immersion few films dared attempt, but it left behind a lesson. When the camera is the character, the risk becomes frighteningly personal. And for some filmmakers, personal wasn't enough. They demanded something illegal. Fact Hasontu, El Mariachi, 1,992, $7,000 and real guns in the streets. Most filmmakers start with permits. Robert Rodriguez started with a borrowed camera, live ammunition, and blind faith. El Mariachi, Rodriguez's debut, was made on a shoestring budget of $7,000 and a complete disregard for safety. The film was shot in the streets of Ciudad Acuña, Mexico, using non-actors, real guns, and no location permits. In one infamous scene, a shootout unfolds in a public square. Locals didn't know a movie was being filmed. They scattered in panic. A woman reportedly fainted after hearing what she believed were real gunshots. They were. The guns fired blanks, but blanks can still kill. With no prop master on set, Rodriguez relied on friends to handle weapons. In several takes, actors pointed firearms directly at each other's faces, something any professional set would ban outright. Police shut down filming twice. In one case, officers drew their own weapons before realizing it was a film shoot. Rodriguez was nearly arrested. The finished product, though rough, radiated energy. It caught the eye of Hollywood, leading to Desperado and a long career. But the origin story remains shocking. A film birthed from chaos, without insurance, safety, or second chances. Rodriguez said later, "We didn't know the rules, so we broke all of them." And sometimes, breaking rules meant pulling off the impossible, not with effects, but with brute force. Fact Hassan 3, Fitzcarraldo, 1,982, dragging a real ship over a mountain. Most directors would use miniatures. Werner Herzog used madness. Fitzcarraldo tells the story of a man who drags a steamship over a mountain in the Amazon jungle to build an opera house. Herzog didn't fake it. He actually dragged a 320-ton steamship up and over a real Peruvian hill without models, without effects, and without mechanical assistance. The production was as chaotic as the premise. Crew members suffered injuries. Indigenous workers quit en masse. At one point, a plane crash killed several support staff bringing supplies. Locals accused the film of desecrating sacred land. Herzog, unfazed, pressed on. Lead actor Klaus Kinski was reportedly so volatile that one indigenous tribe offered to kill him for Herzog. The director declined but didn't deny the temptation. When the ship finally reached the summit, the celebration was brief. The winch system nearly collapsed, threatening to crush everyone below. Had it failed, the ship would have tumbled down the slope, obliterating the crew. The scene is breathtaking, not just because of its scale, but because it actually happened. No green screen, no tricks, just willpower and a disregard for human risk. Herzog once said, "If I abandoned this project, I would be a man without dreams." But for everyone else on set, those dreams came dangerously close to nightmares. And if Fitzcarraldo felt reckless, the next film openly broke the law to get the perfect shot. Fact Hasson 4. The French Connection, 1971. A car chase shot illegally in live traffic. It's one of cinema's greatest car chases, and it wasn't legal. In The French Connection, Gene Hackman's character barrels through Brooklyn under a train, dodging real cars and pedestrians. What audiences didn't know: the production never got a permit to film in traffic. Director William Friedkin, frustrated with stage-looking chase scenes, instructed his stunt driver to race through the city with real vehicles on the road. They mounted the camera on the car's bumper and filmed at full speed through red lights, past buses, into live intersections. Accidents happened. A car not involved in the shoot was struck. A pedestrian was nearly hit. One scene shows a woman leaping back onto the sidewalk at the last second. That wasn't scripted. Friedkin later admitted, "It was completely insane." But the adrenaline? You feel it because it's real. The city threatened legal action. Insurance companies balked. The crew kept quiet. And when the film won the Oscar for Best Picture, no one mentioned that the most iconic sequence was also a crime. But that's what made it legendary. And while The French Connection broke rules to make fiction feel real, sometimes the rules were broken because reality was more cinematic than fiction. Fact Hasson 5. Come and See, 1985. A war scene, too real to fake. It's not an action film in the Hollywood sense, but it might be the most harrowing ever filmed. Come and See, a Soviet war film directed by Elim Klimov, aimed to show World War II as it truly was: relentless, brutal, dehumanizing. To achieve that, the production went to horrifying lengths. The lead actor, Alexei Kravchenko, was only 14 years old. He wasn't just acting traumatized, he was traumatized. The director allegedly used live ammunition in certain scenes. Explosions went off feet from the boy. His hair turned gray from stress during filming. No prosthetics were used for many death scenes. Dead animals were real. The mud was real. The fear was real. Kravchenko reportedly didn't speak for weeks after production wrapped. One scene, where villagers are locked inside a church and set on fire, was so disturbing that extras reportedly broke down sobbing, despite knowing it was staged. There was no emotional buffer, no protective distance between the performers and the horror. Klimov wanted to strip away every cinematic filter and succeeded. Come and See remains one of the most powerful war films ever made, but its power came at a cost. For its cast and crew, the line between art and trauma no longer existed. And for one final story, we'll look at a film so reckless, so bizarre, it didn't make the list because it barely qualifies as cinema at all. Bonus fact: Game of Death, 1978. Bruce Lee's corpse was used to finish the film. This one didn't make the top 15, but it might just be the strangest of all. Game of Death was supposed to be Bruce Lee's magnum opus, a film that showcased his martial arts philosophy, unfiltered. He shot several key scenes in 1972, including the iconic yellow jumpsuit sequence. But before he could finish, Lee died suddenly at age 32. 5 years later, desperate to cash in on his legacy, Golden Harvest Studios decided to complete the film without him. They used stand-ins with prosthetic masks, awkward editing, and recycled footage from his earlier work. But the most disturbing decision? They used real footage from Bruce Lee's funeral. One scene shows the protagonist meant to be Lee lying in a coffin. The filmmakers didn't recreate it. They inserted actual footage of Lee's open casket, his lifeless face on full display. Audiences were horrified. Critics condemned the move as grotesque exploitation. The final film bore little resemblance to Lee's vision, its plot clumsy, its tone hollow, its heart absent, yet it became a commercial success, riding the wave of Lee's cult status. For years, viewers didn't know what they were watching. When the truth came out, it cemented Game of Death as one of the most ethically questionable films ever released. It wasn't just too real for Hollywood, it was real in the most morbid, voyeuristic sense. And unlike the other films on this list, the danger here wasn't in the action, but in the desperation to keep a legend alive. even in death. Which of these productions crossed the line? Was it bravery or recklessness, art or exploitation? In a world where CGI can fake anything, is there still value in putting real lives at risk for the sake of a shot? Or have we mistaken danger for dedication? Tell us, which scene felt too real for comfort, and which one, if any, was worth the price?